Like I owe you an email from with Sadiq. I have to. He actually called tonight. So I need to connect you guys. I've just been slammed with we're doing the, getting everyone ready to get back into school.
Oh yeah, no worries. We'll catch up on that.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll definitely catch up though. I look forward to it. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Hmm. Well.
So was anybody else here on Tuesday's film?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what did you think, Wendy?
I thought it was just incredible. I mean, this is a whole new kind of history for me. I'm from the UK, so we have a very different, kind of experience. So I thought it was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, just that sense of how the culture, particularly around the militarization, and see a tiny little place, I think in, was it Concord, sitting around deciding to get this giant piece of equipment, and it's just, it's surreal at some levels, yeah, if it wasn't so frightening. Yeah.
In a way, I wish, I want to make sure that Rudy sees it sometime, because some of the footage was phenomenal. I mean, I think you really have to wonder how they got that footage in that level.
It blinked back out.
Also, some of the things that I think, some individuals, particularly in the police service, were the way that they were speaking, and yet they knew that they were on camera.
Right.
They knew it, yeah, just felt so comfortable.
I know.
Smashing in windows of a property to pick up small amounts of weed, and it's just amazing. Yeah.
For those of you who weren't on, this is a film called Do Not Resist, which documented in very painful and vivid ways the militarization of the police, and it had this really remarkable footage from Ferguson on the ground, live, and then also the way the police are trained and the purchase of all this military equipment, and it's a remarkable film, and I encourage you to check it out at some point. It's very frightening. Rudy, I was saying, I mean, some of the footage, I mean, this is a documentarian. I mean, these people were just showed themselves, right? That some of the things that they were saying, and so these filmmakers clearly got their confidence in some way, and they didn't care. They didn't seem to care what they looked like. Yeah. So it was amazing.
Interesting.
I think about how the young men, in your film, the confidence that they had to be able to speak openly with you, and the ability to do that is a special ability to get people to.
Well, yeah, it has to do, as I said, in our situation with the young men and their long-term relationships with the street workers that they were working with, who was there for them, and they built up that trust. And regardless of whether they went 2 steps forward and 1 back, the street workers consistently stayed with them. So after a couple of years of that, they began to trust and open up. And because we went out with the street workers and we were with them, that's the only way they felt comfortable enough to be able to open up and say the things they needed to say, so.
Yeah. So, and remind us, how long were you shooting? How long did it take to shoot that film?
Well, we started filming in late 2013. Then we went back 2014, 2015, 2016.
Okay.
So
Wow.
most of the footage, and then we started the editing process, and then we would go back out in the city and get visuals of the city because we wanted to make the city a character in the film.
Right.
That was one of the questions in the chat, was about the work of the street workers and how that organization has changed, and if it still exists. People were wondering what maybe for Donald, what is the status of that role in the community?
Well, that particular organization closed. It kind of merged maybe 10 of us to the city. But again, the change came with the city because of the unions. So because of the union, we couldn't do the same things that we were doing before. Like
Actually,
Oh, go ahead.
I had a question about that because I thought I saw this morning. So I live in Jamaica Plain, like right next to, like between Forest Hills and Franklin Park. And I saw a group of young men this morning wearing t-shirts that on the back that said street worker, like something like union, or which I was confused at, right? Because I thought at the end of this film, yeah, it said something about that not having existed anymore.
So those are the kids. Those are these are the summer programs right now.
Okay.
So they have a lot of young people out cleaning up and stuff like that.
Got it.
And because of the culture in the city, right? You have to have something that separates you from the rest of the young people, unfortunately.
It's interesting.
Did anything replace the street safe? Because they were just incredible people who had such empathy and compassion and practical advice, as well. So did anything replace it, or?
So the city street worker program was present before Street Safe.
Yeah.
And so the difference always will be through the city is the union, because even no matter how much compassion you had, if you work anywhere outside of your allotted time to work and something happens, you could lose your job.
I was thinking, my cousin he's incarcerated right now, and he's actually, I don't know if he's found a lot of motivation in networking the community within during his time. And I said, when you come out, I wonder if we can find a program for you to work like someplace like streets. And I sent his father this trailer and saying, geez, when Jesse comes out, it would be wonderful if he could connect with this type of work, to be working between the community and his community of incarcerated colleagues that he's coming out of. So, I said, does he need the degree in social work? Would he get involved? How does that process work?
So with Street Safe, they did a vetting process. So you had, Boston police went through your whole life before they would allow you to be present in the Street Safe, street workers, because there's a lot of sensitive information that we had too, that everybody wasn't privy to. So we knew whoever was active, like very active, we had lists of all the different young people throughout the entire city. So it's a very intensive vetting process.
Thank you.
Trial and error, because there were some people that came through that kind of were still doing what they used to do.
Yeah.
So, but definitely the program itself, I liked it because it was rewarding. We definitely were able to save a lot of lives, make a lot of change. Some of the young people that you got to see in the film, some of them were doing pretty good.
But Donald, it's interesting because you know, in the work that we do nationally, we, you know, kind of talk to people in other cities, you know, and it's fascinating to me that the so-called Boston miracle seems to be operating everywhere but Boston, right? So, no, I'm serious. You know, like people talk about the strategy that they've adopted, you know, where they got it from, you know, and so, you know, it's clear, you know, so, you know, I'm curious kind of how you feel about that piece of it. I mean, you know what I'm saying? You know that people are using it in other parts of the country, right?
Right. Here's one of the problems when they speak on the Boston Miracle. It really wasn't a miracle. You know, it was multiple young men were killed, and the other half went to prison.
Yep.
You know, the federal government actually came in, and that's when they started locking guys up with the RICO law. So, you know, they started making it seem like it was organized crime and giving people 15 years. So even some of the uptick in violence right now was those guys just now starting to come home. And so I think in other cities, you know, and I have some friends that do this work in some other cities. The difference is that and I'll use Detroit for an example. Detroit, they have a program out there, but their mayor works alongside with the young men out there in that city to empower them to do the work that they need to do. Here it's a little bit different, a little more territorial, a little more, a lot more nepotism goes on here too. So a lot of places that deserve the funding don't get the funding that's needed. So I think that's the difference. So like an organization like Street Safe should have never closed because it was too productive. But it's counterproductive to what people really want, and they want the government fund. So if crime is still happening, funding is still happening.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I guess my question in response to that is, so you were saying that like there's more nepotism in Boston, there's more, I guess because you also talked about this in the film too, or where you're addressing how like gang structure in Boston is very different from in places in like Chicago and LA. And I guess why do you think things in Boston are so different from other places when it comes to these structures?
Well, I mean, the gang life in other cities is, you know, they're more organized. You know, they're very organized. But Boston, every 10 years in Boston, if you pay attention, every 10 years you'll see the same things happen that cause a major shift in the city, right? So the parks are closed. They'll start redoing the parks. They'll close some of the community centers, and some they'll close early. And, you know, then at the same time that's happening, more guns and drugs pour right into the city. And we're back to where we were. And everything that happens, and I'm gonna kind of go off into another piece to kind of get a better picture. It's like the opioid addiction right now. So people go to the clinic to get better. Right before they're about to get their housing, they get put out the program. They get put out the program, what happens? They go back into the spiral, they come back to the program. That way the program continues to get money. So it's not really designed to stop the issue. It's really more of a Band-Aid to keep the cash flow coming in. So that's kind of how it works with the whole gang culture.
So there's another thing I think, Donna, I'm curious what you think about this. Because Boston, you know, it's interesting. You know, Boston prides itself as being a city of neighborhoods, right? That's why everybody, you know, from the politicians, and they encourage that way of thinking, you know. They're proud, Boston's a city of neighborhoods. And, you know, and I think you know, in all cities, the gang life has its territorial dimensions.
Right.
But there's something in Boston about kind of preserving the integrity of the block or whatever, or the unit that I think, you know, kind of flows from the way the city itself, you know, the way we're encouraged to think about ourselves as residents of a neighborhood, and this neighborhood is different from that neighborhood.
Right.
And you know, and so it creates this kind of us and them mentality that trickles down, I think, to this idea of all of these different gangs from a different development or a different street. I'm curious what I mean, you know, you have us, you know, look, I'm from Chicago, Blackstone Rangers, man, you know, they were territorial, but, but as you say, that was, you know, that was a business, right?
Right.
And, you know, so I'm curious about this kind of territorial piece, right? That's a big piece of life here in Boston, right?
Right. So with the territories, and you know, we still have the same problem within organizations.
It looks like Natasha may have got.
Yeah, she made it.
Welcome.
All right. Hey, Natasha.
So where was I at? Yeah, the territorial piece. So we have the same thing happening. It's not just on the young people level either. You know, a lot of organizations, it's the same thing. You know, and in this work that we do, you know, I find myself telling some of my colleagues sometimes, right? Some are from Mattapan, some are from Dorchester, some are from Roxbury, and when they speak, you know, where they're from. I grew up in the South End, so I grew up in a totally different environment. It was more of a melting pot in the South End when I grew up. So when I speak Boston, because if you put it in the box of, well, I'm from the South End, so I'm not really gonna mess with the people in Mattapan, and that mindset affects all the work that we do. And so if I'm telling a young man, hey, I need you to, you know, let's work on, you know, your lifestyle. Let's get you a job. You need some mental health help, things like that. But then in the same breath, I say, yeah, but I don't mess with those guys in Dorchester. What am I really teaching them? So it's unfortunate, but that's how we keep the politics the way the politics are, because they change the zoning. You know, they'll move, like where I live right now, technically I'm in Dorchester, but when I was a kid, right before I moved up this way, this was Mattapan.
Right. Well, right, it's like the South End of Roxbury, right? It's the same, right. You know, it depends on who you ask where you are. You know,
right.
But again,
my wife grew up on Northampton Street, right? So one side of Northampton was Roxbury, right. The other side was South End. So we always, you know, laugh. It's just I'm from the South End. I'm like, nah, you're from Roxbury.
Yeah, it's funny, but it's not. You know, I mean, I remember. You know, it's interesting because, you know, we did some work. You know, I don't know how many of you remember the creation of the seaport. We look at the seaport today as this white enclave, and we kind of wonder how that happened, right?
Right.
And you know, the history of that is very much that originally when Menino started all this drive for the seaport, that was called. Do you remember what it was called originally?
I don't.
It was called the South Boston Seaport. And that's profound, right? Because the issue was that the people of South Boston wanted to name and own and control the community benefits that came from the money that was going to produce the seaport. Right. And the people who controlled that were the same people who fought busing, literally. I mean, literally the very same people. This thing called the South Boston Betterment Trust, right? They wanted the money. And, you know, and we sued the city, you know, about that, you know, because because part of Chinatown touches the seaport, you know, the different neighborhoods touch the seaport. So the idea, so here we had a chance to
what was that called? The South Boston Betterment? Betterment?
Trust.
Okay, thank you.
You look it up. I mean, and so what happened? We sued them. We said, you can't do that, right? And what we had at that time was an opportunity to create a whole new neighborhood in Boston, right? How many cities in the 20th century have an opportunity to create a whole new neighborhood, literally from nothing? And then the bottom fell out of the development market and everybody forgot about it. And then it came back in a flourish. And it came back as this white enclave because nobody was looking, right? So it's a huge opportunity. So it's still, they took off the name South Boston, right? So it's not called the South Boston Seaport now, it's just called the Seaport. But the effect is the same, right? And I think that's because this place is so neighborhood driven, right? So this idea of creating something for the city doesn't exist. It's like when you tell your young people, and they said in the film, right? I can't go over there. I can't go to Dorchester.
Right.
And all this. I mean, my point is, I think it's not their fault. I mean, it's
right.
It's the nature of this city to be parochial in that way.
Right.
South Boston being like primarily like white. I'm not from Boston, so I'm like still trying to, because South Boston is primarily like white Irish, kind of like that zone.
Yes, like South Boston was the locus. South Boston was the locus of school integration. South Boston is the place where all of the violence took place and the hatred to protect that neighborhood. When they desegregated the housing there, it was violent.
And what year did this happen with the trying to call it the South Boston Seaport?
So I think that was in the late 90s. I think it first started in the late 90s.
And so look at that, the late 90s, right? And so it goes right into, how did this affect, the young people? And it was by design, because now young men are fighting over streets that they don't own, they don't get taxes for, their parents may or may not own something over there, but they're fighting hard to keep their identity right here. And I'll just use H Block because everyone talks about H Block because it's such a long strip of, streets with the letter H, Homestead, Howardworthy, Harrow Street, things like that. So that's why they call it H Block. But they're fighting for, to be recognized. And unfortunately, they're fighting to be recognized by who can kill who can, who can be the best gangster out of all the gangsters in the city of Boston. And so that's why you have so many gangs, which is crazy because it's like a half street, like a dead end street can have like 20 hardcore killers on it. And there'll be a gang, and it only became a gang because they just wanted to be a part of the culture, maybe because they were tired of being bullied. So there's so many other pieces that play into it.
Can I just ask on that? Because one of the things that struck me in the film, there was this discussion around trigger days, like at-risk days, and there was certain, like the sort of hidden history of who had died on particular days, and that would become a point of friction. And, so the kind of street safe environment was, they really tuned in to what those trigger days were, what the risks were, that something might kick off. So they really kind of tuned into almost like a hidden history. And I was wondering, how is that captured? Is it carried in stories from gang to gang or gang members to, how is that history of who died and when, and how is that story carried through the cultures?
So I'll just give an example like this. So let's say I was 2
Yeah.
or 3 and, you know, someone killed my father or a family member, the family's always talking about it. Because the way the streets work, everyone knows who did what, just no one says who did what. And then when that birthday, when that birthday comes around, you know, people are hanging out, they start thinking about it. They're like, you know what, let's go over here. Or if it's the day that the person died, you know, they're like, you know what, let's go over here. So like what Leroy was saying in the film, if you already know that and you allow them to, you know, because we didn't stop people from drinking and smoking, we let them do what they do. And that was really so we could keep an eye on them too, right? But if you know they're nice now, right? And you say, all right, I'll see y'all later. You best believe before the night was up, they caught someone on a particular street, whether it was the right person or not, just to say we did it. So now you just added another anniversary to the equation.
Yeah. So it's carried in a kind of oral history through the stories that people tell each other, and then, as you say, the events that mark those events.
Right.
Kind of gets layered and layered. So do you think the people are literally carrying a kind of collective trauma with this, you know, this sense of stories upon stories and this experience?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think the trauma piece, PTSD.
Yeah, that's what I felt from the film.
Yeah. I wanted to just introduce Tasha, if you guys don't mind. So Tasha's, I think, relative Jordan is in the film, and he talks about losing one of his relatives, and he talks about it happening at a Chinese restaurant. And Natasha, I just wanted to give you a chance, as the mother of the young man who was murdered, to be able to speak to that, you know, the trauma and how you've been able to deal with it, Natasha.
Hi. It's been a struggle. My son Darian Carrington lost his life at the age of 18, and he was coming home from my father's house at the time, and he had stopped at the Chinese restaurant on Dorchester Ave, which was right around the corner from home. So he was literally almost home, and he was inside the restaurant ordering some food, and he got shot. That for me, because Darian was my only child, was a heart-wrenching part of my life. From that time up until now, it's been a really hard struggle. It's been 12 years, January 8th, 2008, and the first 10 years I suffered in silence. And I came to the Peace Institute 2 years ago, and that's basically how I started my healing journey from my loss and from my trauma. And Donald is an old friend back from when we were children, and he works at the Peace Institute, and he's been a very instrumental part of my healing process. But Darian was a very, very humble young man. He was a good person, and it's very tragic that he lost his life the way that he did.
And Natasha, I know that you celebrate his life, because from a friend of mine who is a great friend of yours, Wanda, she invited me to come to all of those celebrations, because I also wanted to meet you. And so you have a way of commemorating, and it's at that, it was more like a celebration.
Yes. I continue to memorialize and celebrate my son's life. He's deeply rooted in my heart, and I don't consider my son as a statistic or another lost body. He was a human being. He was a living being, and I will continue to keep his memory alive as Darian Carrington was. And that celebration was celebrating his heavenly 30th birthday. So I truly appreciate you coming and meeting me.
Tasha, are you comfortable talking a little bit about the Peace Institute? I mean, I think the whole audience had an idea that that's where Donald is, but I think it's important if you're comfortable to, you know, it's a good way to learn a little bit about the Peace Institute, you know, in terms of whether and how it's been helpful to you, and kind of, if you're comfortable, I think it would be good for people to hear.
Yes. So my current pastor, I'm a member of St. John Missionary Baptist Church, and they're located at 230 Warren Street in Roxbury. And I was raised in that church, and Darian was raised in that church. And his wife actually placed it in my heart to do the Mother's Walk for the first time 2 years ago. And that was basically how I was introduced to the Peace Institute. And at that time, they have events leading up to the Mother's Day walk. And I attended one of the meetings, and that was where I was introduced to Miss Tina Sherry. And after that, I met with Miss Tina Sherry one-on-one, probably about a week later. And that was where I basically shared my story, which was at that time 10 years in. And she took that time with me for about 8 months one-on-one to help me begin my process for my healing. And it's a very, very great experience, because when you go through that grieving stage and you don't realize that you're really, you know, basically what I was doing, I was grieving. I was never giving myself time to heal. And now that I connected with the Peace Institute, they have shown me nothing but love, and they embraced me, and it's constant. As long as you stick with it, it's good for you. So it's kind of hard to put in words, because they're the love that they give you, and they're a center for healing and learning and teaching. So I've been through mindfulness classes, I've been through holistic healing classes, and it's changed me. They gave me a voice. I felt like when Darian passed away, my voice was taken away from me. They've given me my voice back, and I'm able to now heal, which is what I wasn't doing before.
Can Donald or Tosh, can you say anything about Peace Play? I mean, about the role can either one of you talk about that at all?
Donna, you can talk about it.
Sure. So for me, before I ever worked at the Peace Institute, I was doing some volunteer, before even Street Safe, I was doing volunteer stuff in the community. And Miss Haley, I'm not sure if you know who Miss Haley is from Heath Street.
No.
But she was like the matriarch of the whole Heath Street. She passed away maybe time's flying, so it might have been 4 or 5 years ago. But I started doing some neighborhood, violence prevention with her. And so she had us doing all these different trainings. So we went to the Peace Institute to do a training, and they had this, the sand play. And so, I didn't go there for that. I was going to, get some other skills, but, we did this sand play, and it kind of opens you up. It's like using different little figurines, kind of like whatever you're looking at calls you, you pick it up, you put it in and into the sand, and it's like you creating your own world. But at the same time, you're sharing it with other people and kind of showing how everyone's world, intersects. It intersects how important we are to one another, but it also opens up some things that you may not have talked about. You know, sometimes we suppress things that were very traumatizing to us. And then, you know, with the peace play, it might just pop to your mind, and then you start having that discussion and really start dealing with those things that may have been holding you back. You know, sometimes they say, you know, you block your own blessing, and you just don't know why you keep doing it. You know, you're in that same cycle. So the peace play was actually pretty good for me back then. And I was like, man, I'm not doing it no more. And I never had an idea on working at the Peace Institute, you know. But when I was doing the street safe part, I always wondered, you know, when I walked the family to view their loved one who just passed away, I would always wonder, what's next for them? You know, because the 90s, there was nothing. There was nothing like the Peace Institute. Everyone, you know, dealt with what they dealt with the best way they knew how, whether that was alcohol, drugs, or whatever, right? And, you know, we had a whole community 25 years later in pain. But the Peace Institute was available, so I always referred people there before I was working there. And then being there, you know, just being able to support a family in their most dire time, you know, where there's really no words that you can express that's going to help them at the moment, but also being prepared to be there for the long term too, because most places are like, we're going to help you. Up, I finish, see you later. You know, so that's the difference. But that peace play definitely opens up more of you. You know, I did it once at the DYS, and so the counselors that work there, I'm gonna call them counselors, that's what they should be, but they're there with the young men. So I'm like, everybody's doing it. And they're like, okay. So they're, you know, putting their things in. And, you know, we went through the process, and, you know, the grown folks was trying to hide the tears from the young men because it opens you up like that. It makes you deal with some stuff you just didn't want to deal with.
Yes, it does.
I just wanted to add, I know at the end of our screening last week, Sarah, you mentioned that there are some folks, some librarians, who feel like they're through learning and they want to figure out what they can do next, right? And there are all these organizations that's doing the work. And one of the challenges is, how do you kind of make those connections, right? And on the call, we have Meredith, who has been great in helping us to kind of get word out about the film, because she's really thinks that, you know, there are solutions here to the issues. So I just wanted to point that out, that there are many organizations doing the work, which Donald can certainly speak to. But Meredith, is there anything you wanted to say?
Okay.
Oh, Meredith?
Oh, yes. I beg your pardon. Oh my gosh. It is just so important to me to hear what all of you have to say. I mean, I could go on for hours about the message of this movie. I think it's a matter of life and death. And I think the message of this movie is a lifesaver. It presents a proven youth intervention model that I think should be copied in every city in the United States and beyond. And I was just minding my own business when I stumbled into a screening in January of last year, 2019, in Jamaica Plain. And this movie stopped me dead in my tracks. I think it is that powerful. And so ever since then, I just tried to do what I could do to promote it.
I think, you know, it does have this effect of just being extremely intimate. You know, I keep watching other films afterwards and saying, wait a minute, you don't come away with this same intimacy with these relationships that you've introduced us to, and Natasha, to you and your family as well. And I guess what Rudy was referring to as we were talking about, you know, so what is the call to action that we can follow up with this film with, you know? And so thinking about, is there, you know, is there a partnership with the Peace Institute that we could develop, or are there ways that we can, you know, we were talking about, we have this book club that is, you know, 160 people signed up for the first day. And this book club, I said, people are anxious to help, wanting to put their energies, their time, their involvement. And, you know, if you had that chance to invite the Harvard community, where would you like them to participate? I guess it's a really open question, but.
I feel like they should be in all the organizations, you know, because each one is different. Like what I do, you know, work with a family in that initial time frame. I don't think everybody could do it. You know, being at the hospital, seeing people, you know, fresh with the wounds and things like that, and sometimes passing. I don't think everybody could do it, but if there's enough people that can do a lot of different things, I would say check into all the organizations, you know, Peace Institute. You have SOAR, which is the new street worker program. You have ROCA. You have Youth Connect, Youth Build. You know, so there's many things, but I would also add, you know, and this is something that our white colleagues have different than what we have, right? Is you guys can actually start pushing the changing of legislation and laws, because a lot of the laws and things are what keeps perpetuating the situations that are occurring, you know. So a young man, you know, I shared this story with you. This young man that I was working with while I was at Street Safe, he was born in the Dominican Republic. So he was born there. He came to the United States when he was like 2 or 3, right, with his parents. As he got older, his mom went back to her country, which wasn't the Dominican Republic, and then his father went back to Cuba or something. So I don't know how they ended up in the Dominican Republic, had him, but now he's here in Massachusetts, right? And so now he's getting involved in the gang culture. He gets arrested with a bag of weed, which spirals him into, you know, you can't go to school now. You know, they're trying to deport him. But his situation was pretty interesting because he didn't have a birth certificate. So when we were looking to help him out, me and Omira, we were looking to help him out. The Dominican Republic is like, we don't have any record of this young man ever being born here. So we don't know what you're talking about. So now we're trying to help him, right? So one day I get a call for the hospital. I go down there talking to this young man's sister, but he had a different ID in his pocket, so I didn't know it was him. So I'm talking to his sister this whole time. We prepare her to go walk in and view his body, and I walk in and it's him. And I felt so hurt because we did everything. Like even a immigration attorney wanted $8,000 just to look at the case to see if he can help him, right? And so I feel like if we could change those laws, I won't say reform because I don't think reform is gonna work. I think tearing up that old paperwork and starting fresh will be the difference. So if anyone is, you know, into the politics, you know, start leading those marches, start leading those changes, start holding, you know, people that you know in those roles accountable to do the work. Because, you know, our young people, they can't make that change, but y'all can make that change, and us together can really make that change. So I would even encourage you to do that too.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Coach Wilson, I don't know where he disappeared to, but he's been involved with Pop Warner Youth Football for many, many years and has influenced so many of those young people's lives through sports and teaching them, you know, about, you know, life lessons through sports. I know that we have another street worker, Vidal, who is spoken with Malik about doing something around music, because music is such a draw to these young people. Malik, you want to just talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I mean, basically, Vidal is one of the other street workers that's actually, in the film. But, he and I've been doing mentoring kids from really elementary. Well, elementary is just really exposing them to the creativity behind music. Middle school is that age when they're starting to be active out in the streets, things like that. Also that age where there's no, public schools, there's no music classes, no music education anyway. So that's already one issue. And then into high school and college level. So being able to kind of going into a school and kind of share the business of music. If someone's not as creative, let's say if you have 10 kids, maybe 2 of them might be talented, singer, rapper, maybe one kid is like the producer, the guy that's, a musician or someone that's aspiring to do that. And then you have the other 7 kids, like what do you do with those other kids? So I try to go in and talk to them about a lot of other aspects of music, especially the business behind music, because everyone wants to make money. Everybody thinks they can be creative and they want to be able to, be a star and make money. But again, you only have those few kids that can actually go in and on a creative level and share with each other. And the other 7 are really just hanging around. And that's where the trouble starts there. So I try to go in and share with them, even tuning pianos and, you could be a guitar tech or these other trades that are within the industry that you can do outside of the business of, copyright, like administration, publishing, music licensing, things like that. So Vidal, it wanted to, I think it's probably a couple years ago that I met him, through Rudy, and we sat down and we've been in touch ever since. We knew we were going to do something, not really sure what, but over this past, actually during this COVID time, we've been spending a lot of time talking back and forth about him establishing his company and doing these little Zoom calls with other influential people and other creative people in the community to try to see how we can bring in resources, other companies that I'm working with, software companies, things like that I've talked to about This Ain't Normal, as well as what do they do? Like, so this company here, Isotope, that I probably wear this year, I'm one of their artists. So when I go to them and say, hey, check out this film, they're already blown away because they don't know this stuff is going on, right? And, things like Blackout Tuesday, when they have like, 200 employees there and, like 10 of them are on a committee to try to figure out what do we do, to kind of like recognize, and they have no idea. So I'm getting that phone call because people are frustrated or whatever. So I say, listen, these are organizations that are doing this work already in the community that don't have the resources. You need to really connect with them. Like I'm a, creative person, the same as all of us involved with the film. Like we're not, involved with those organizations per se, but we use it as a vehicle to kind of share and create awareness. So I've been trying to do that, like with Vidal, talking to him about who's out there, trying to get some corporation or, a creative corporation to kind of, with funding, to be able to kind of direct that towards a program or create a new program, really is what we're talking about doing, really creating a new program that doesn't exist at this time. So that's some of the work that I've been doing behind the scenes, only because I've already been doing it, but now we have an opportunity and we just got to keep on figuring it out. So
I think this is beautiful. And we talked a little bit, I think at the end of the last filming about how, what are the resources that are available at Harvard or in the library in these spaces, both human capacity and just physical, so as much as saying, how does the Harvard community go to the Peace Institute and volunteer and help, but also how do we have you support your work on our campus and make sure that the campus is open to supporting your work. So
yeah,
look forward to thinking that with you. Yeah,
we were talking about that in so Sarah and I kind of had a post Zoom one-on-one before we hung up the last time, and I was explaining to her, for myself, being a kid that's from Dorchester, Cobman Square, I kind of grew up. I was a welfare kid and all the rest of that stuff. 9 brothers and sisters. There's a lot of backstory to why we all end up the way we do. and why, you know, why, even from an economical standpoint, right? How do we get to that place, right? When I did have 2 parents in the house, that kind of thing. But if you can imagine 10 kids in the same house or 13 people in the same house, you know, my father had a lot of challenges, right? So he was working all day long, and then parents not getting along, those kind of issues that happen. So I'm that same kid. So when I was talking to you, I'm like, oh, wow, I'm actually on the line with a librarian right now from Harvard. This is pretty cool, right? And so my whole life I've gone through that, and I share that emotion with people only because it's such a big deal, because we still are connected to who we were when we were younger kids. I reflect on that and say, well, I wouldn't be doing most of the things that I was doing if I did not have those mentors in different environments, from school, from my neighbor, you know, into college, you know, different people that I worked with doing odd jobs because I needed to pay for school or buy clothes and all these different things. So for me, it's important to kind of point that out, because people look at me now like, oh, who's this music guy, right? So it's like, yeah, I still do this, but I'm still very connected to what's going on with my people from a community level. And community doesn't mean like just Black too. That's another thing that happens. Within our communities, if we're neighbors, if we're friends, if we grew up together, that same kid I've known from 4 years old ends up being my brother. The same kid from middle school or high school, even if they're the white kid, ends up being pretty much family to us because we grow up that way. Outside of our community, people don't really look at that. So that's another thing within music. I use that to bring that to the forefront, to say, you know, music is this universal language, right? And that really is, it's real that it does promote diversity, right? It promotes awareness of other cultures and things like that, because we get in the room creatively and we get fascinated with one another, which is what I try to share again with kids and students or youth. Because again, they're not thinking about that, because it's an unconscious thing that happens when you're actually stimulated by this external creativity that we have, right? And we become in awe of each other. So someone like you, Sarah, all of a sudden, like you said, maybe doing something at Harvard Library, that's unheard of, you know? Like for kids in the community, like Harvard, they don't even want me there. Like I can't go through those gates. What are you talking about? I'm not welcome there. So it takes someone like you in your program, or takes, you know, the heads of a Harvard University, right? Because again, that's not even in our sphere. We don't even think that we can even achieve that. Berkeley and all these other schools, that's not something that younger kids from the community wake up and say, yeah, I want to go to Harvard, right? It's not until Barack Obama that we can even say that we might want to be president. I know I couldn't say that. You know, I know my daughter said that when she was 5, looking at those 2 little girls with dresses on stage, right? That's what does it. She doesn't know what that path is. She understands what that dream is though. So getting people to understand what that image visually, that dream is, that's the motivation and the energy. That's the inspiration that we need. So again, you offering, like doing something with the library, I know I have the ability to invite, you know, because people know me and they're like, what, you can do this? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And that's what I've done over a bunch of years with different organizations, the Audio Engineer Society, the Grammy organization, things like that, where I'm like, yeah, you can actually come. Just like, if I'm not there, just look for this person. There's not enough of us doing that within our community. So again, it takes a collective of us. It takes someone like you that's completely, they wouldn't think ever they'd be able to be invited, that you would be passionate enough to invite them. That's the big deal. Like, what? Who's this white lady? She wants to do what? I'm like, no, that's my friend Sarah. And it takes me calling them in and taking them by the hand, like, no, this is my girl, right? And then we share that way. Then they understand that you're a human being as well. You start seeing them as a human being, and all those other librarians, the other 159, I think, of them, right? They're gonna say, oh, shoot. And then we start seeing each other as people from our community. And we forget about, you know, degrees and all these other things that hold people back mentally from thinking, I could never talk to you. I could never be in a room with you. You know, I could never meet your children or hang out or be at a function with you and have fun with you. And that's the thing that I try to do musically, to break that down. And I'm pretty bold now and outspoken. I wasn't like that when I was younger. And I think this is also the difference within me, where I'm like, wow, like, how come there's nobody else that looks like me here? You know, I can't believe, but only because I created these friendships with people. So I'm really open, trying to create more of those, because I know that it's not something that's a given. It's not a given at all. Same thing with police officers and any other professionals that's out there. We all have dentist friends and attorney friends and doctor friends and everything else, and we look at them as our peers now. younger people from the community that don't know what a master's degree is, you know, they're not looking at that. They don't have the ability to do that mentally. So that's part of that conversation that we have to continue.
Yeah, no, thank you, and I hope you are welcome. No, and know that you're welcome. And I look for you. I look for you. You were teasing me. We have to have tea with the librarians.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, that's what I said. I might as well put it out there. I was telling Sarah, because in my mind, I'm thinking I'm gonna have tea with librarians. That's all I'm hearing is librarians, and librarians have tea. So that's all I want to do. But just that in itself, right?
Yeah.
Us joking around like that, because I was kind of picking on you as well. But that's like real, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, no, I don't have tea. I'm out here doing this, or I'm doing whatever, you know. But if we have an opportunity to have tea, I'm there. Just for the record.
Patience dance.
I'm gonna have to jump off in a minute, but I do want to make a plea here, because it's not just the library; it's also the Houston Institute. I mean, there are lots of folks that, you know, and I think what's important is to understand, and I think that the trick is to change the culture, right? And I think that's what we are trying to do. Last summer, for instance, we had 25 DOIS involved kids from the Boston Public Schools involved in a program at Radcliffe around Angela Davis. We did, so this kind of work is not unique. And I want to speak to this question about the film too. I'm going to tell you, after we saw the film, the day after we screened the film last week, my colleague and I had a conversation with a very prominent member of the Massachusetts State Senate. He telling them kind of where we stood on some reform police stuff. And in that conversation, I said, listen, last night we just screened this film. I think the whole legislature should see this film. Mm-hmm. And I do. I think the whole city council should see this film. So I think that, when we talk about, and Meredith says, she left?
I think she just left.
Damn. I mean, this was
I'll convey it to her.
But so I do think that it's important, and in a way, I think the point, Malik, that Sarah, that we make is that there are other people here. There she is.
There she is, Meredith.
Meredith, I was just talking to you.
She's connecting.
About things to do with the film.
Meredith, David was speaking to you.
Yeah. So I was just saying that in particular things about the ways to use the film, I think we should start to try to make sure that our legislators have seen this film, that our city councilors have seen this film, that elected officials have seen this film, that this film is seen, widely with conversations. And Donald, I have to tell you, man, I was on a Zoom this morning with one of your H Block with Andrea James, right? Another H Block, right? Resident. And so that's another organization I think people know about, Families for Justice is Healing. Does remarkable work, really on the ground organizing, and is an opportunity. And in fact, I mentioned this film to her in my conversation, and Rudy, she said, I said, I'll send you the link, and I didn't send her the link. She emailed me a half hour later, said, here's the link. I want to see this movie.
Yeah.
And we screened this movie. We had, 150, 200 people in Ames Hall, right?
Yeah, no, it was great.
And so I think what we have to do, Emily, is how do we leverage these things? And as Sarah and I both say, it's a two-way street, right? We need to kind of open up Harvard, the campus, and get over this notion. But also Harvard needs to be in the community, right?
Definitely.
And that's part of it, and that's part of what our work is oriented toward.
Yeah, that's great. I just wanted to add, Harvard's, Harvard is great with the Phillips Brooks House, the work they're doing, and they're great with the Year Up program. And because I work with a lot of the Year Up interns, because I want to be able to impact. But I just wanted to say a couple of great things that has happened. Today in the Harvard Gazette, there was a great article I don't want to toot my, I've worked at Harvard for 24 years. No one knew I was a filmmaker. So anyway, now they know. So there's an article, big spread, and that's really cool. And the Boston Globe, not this Sunday, next Sunday, is going to run a story on Coach and the film. And then I saw, just in looking at the numbers, the film on Voodoo just jumped. So, and I think folks at Harvard, the influence Harvard has, can help in not just getting the film out there, but getting some of these issues out there and being able to do something about it. So I want to thank you guys. Obviously, David, you've been incredible. The times when we're trying to get folks to see the film to be able to commit to do that. And the same here with you, Sarah. That's the only way we can actually get more people to see the film and then be able to figure out how change, what happens next.
So, Rudy, and I gotta say, and Donald, man, since seeing the film again, recently, all the stuff's in my mind. I'm in these conversations with people and about different kinds of change we need. And I remember the comment about the young man with the monitor, right? With the GPS on his leg and what that means, how that puts a target on someone's back, and I'm in these conversations with people talking about bail and pre-release, this is stuff, it's that people aren't thinking about, but the film brings it to life. It's, this is not some abstract thing. And so, the applications are vast.
I think to your point too, David, as far as like the Senate, Congress, city, the city council. So most of them, there's a few that live in the neighborhood now, but most of them don't. And so those issues they don't think about when they're voting. Usually you have people with no children voting what should happen with the children. So I feel like them seeing that film and then us being able to have a real conversation, that will also help with some of the, shifting of laws and things like that. Because, again, we know that most of those laws were put in place to keep, black and brown, at a certain level. And we just have to have the real conversation if we're really talking about, a country that's about justice for all. So I feel like people seeing it. I can't think of the name of this movie, but Tyler Perry was in it. And I remember the lady asking him, in the movie, do you know how much a quart of milk costs? And he didn't know how much a quart of milk costs because he had a whole bunch of money to buy whatever he needed. And she said something to him, then he went and found out how much a quart of milk costs. So if you never had those struggles with rent and, housing issues and the right school and, the right health care, it's no big deal for you to pass a law that puts other people in a bad position. So, and I think in the film is all of those things.
And again, just to bring it back full circle, no mom should have to lose their child, Tasha. So that hurts. I'm a parent. And if we could avoid that and make sure that these mothers who may have lost their children are taken care of and we address them, but in the future, that should not happen.
Yes.
But the other lesson here is that both from the film, the work that you all did in the film, and Tasha, what you're saying about, this is one-on-one work, right? This is not, and it's labor intensive. And as you said, it's 24/7. This is not, and that takes resources, and it takes the commitment of resources over the long haul, right? Mm-hmm. And you can, so my point is, you can make that argument. I can say that till I'm blue in the face, right? But when you watch the film and you see people putting that time in, right? I think it gives it a different gravity. And when we hear you talk, Natasha, about spending that time with Tina Sherry, right? Those are the things I think that our policymakers and our legislators they don't, like you're saying, Donald, they never thought about it, right?
Right.
Right.
So anyway, I mean, I'm starting to preach here. So
No, thank you. It's a call to action, but thank you to Sadie and Wendy. And I mean, you guys care, which is why you're here. And I want to personally thank you and Tasha.
Yeah.
For being,
Thank you. Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
David and Malik, I wanted to circle back to you guys were talking about like like it's people have to feel comfortable, entering spaces at Harvard and whatnot, but like a huge part of that is like on those of us who are here to make it a space that seems like it's for everyone. And I was having this conversation yesterday with another student in my cohort and trying to like explain to her that like a huge part of so my PhD program is like, I want to say like 60 or 70 students across like 6 different cohorts, and there's not a single Black student in my program.
wow.
And that's not atypical, especially in the science programs. And I think she had this misconception that like, oh, there was like a ton of Black students applying every year and Harvard just wasn't letting them in. And it's like, do you think like there's a huge aspect of self-selection as well as like, why would somebody, if it looks the way that it does, why would you apply? And my question for you then, so there's that kind of like preamble. My question is, because there are a bunch of these kinds of initiatives like, and kind of little coalitions and groups and whatever that try to put together like peer mentoring programs and like going to like local high schools, middle schools, what have you, and like recruiting underrepresented kids to kind of like, enter these spaces and whatnot. But to me, the kind of like glaring issue is that we don't, kind of like you were saying, you'd point to like Sarah and be like, this is my peer, this is my equal, she's with me. If we just show up as like a bunch of white adults in like in a space with like lots of children of color and Black children, there's not that kind of, that connection that says like, it just borders on this like weird, uncomfortable area of feeling of like, it's like charity as opposed to like actual, like, no, we're welcoming you into our space as like people who have like equal merit to be here. And I guess I don't know how to navigate like deciding whether or not to participate in these initiatives that kind of end up being like, pat yourself on the back, you went and like, I don't know. Like how to foster these partnerships when we legitimately don't even have people of color to, you know what I mean? So like I'm at a loss of how to do this in an authentic and useful way that isn't demeaning. And I just don't even know.
I think, Sarah, you and I think we kind of touched on this. You just gave yourself the answer to it, but and I'm brutally honest when it comes to this stuff because out of respect, right? I think you respect me and I respect you because we wouldn't be on this call. But unfortunately, just what you're feeling to do, you have to do it. You have to encourage other people to do it, right? So my job of being aware of that, because this is something we've dealt with our whole life, right? We're born as Black people dealing with this, right? So I'm really open to say, something, I wouldn't mind having tea, Sarah. Something, Sadie, I really want to check out when you were telling me about zapping those little lasers, right? I'm saying, where are you? Yeah. I want to be your friend, right? Because that's like one of the coolest thing I've seen that wasn't a cartoon on TV, right? So for me to tell you that and express that to you, and for me to have this interaction with you is really what it takes for me to say, something, I'm going to tell her how cool she is. I'm going to tell her how much I respect you. I'm going to tell you, just like you're sharing with me, because I'm already feeling that already, to be honest with you. And I'm like, oh, you're kind of cool. Me and you can be friends. I just need to share that with you. And so you're already doing it with me. If you and I get into a room and I say, something, Sadie, we could go out and make this thing happen. You down? Right? So then me and you get together and I come and take you in. I dealt with this with our Grammy organization. We had a committee here in Boston, and We're dealing with the BSO and the conservatory, and you know, all the people of color, the people that I brought in, the people, our academy in New York was all the academic representatives, right? So, and they were talking about, oh, well, let's actually get some hip hop raps or get a rapper and bring them to the BSO, right? To go do it. I'm like, no, no, no. You take those chairs from the BSO and you bring them to the Reggie Lewis Center. And that's how you make an impact in our community. But unfortunately, it's kind of like I call it, it's like hashtag WPP. It's a white people problem, right? Because you don't have friends to say, what are you thinking, girl? No, you don't do that, right? I'm not talking about years, hundreds of years of not having this ability to say, yo, so what do you think we should do? Because we're not given that respect over years and years. So it's a typical problem from slave days of telling a Black person what's good for them, right? So it's the most frustrating thing now, even from a political level. You guys need this in your community. No, you didn't ask me nothing. It's exactly not what we need. And now people are more aware and outspoken. And I'm really bad because I'll tell anyone, I shoot from the hip. I don't really care about how people think about me. But respectfully, I say that to say, you know something, that would be awesome if we could do that. Let's sit down and figure out how we do that, because me and you are cool. We haven't even met, right? We you know, cyber met, we're in the space. So the same thing as I wasn't really joking about having tea, because it really is a bonding experience, right? Where we get to know each other, right? You know, that's serious.
Daryl, you wanted on this tea. I know you do that also.
I know you do. That stuff is real too. When I came,
Definitely.
Everybody. If I met you at a conference, right, we might exchange business cards or do some little technology zap, right? But the first thing on our minds, if we wanted to work together, is like, when are you free? When can we have lunch, right? When can we have coffee? That's what needs to happen on a daily basis with everyone that you meet. The other thing that people can do just in general, you know, I think we talked about this, is somebody said in the last conversation we had, and you know, about smiling. You know, what can you do when you get up in the morning, you see somebody walking down past them on the street? Just smile. That's a big part of it, right? We are not used to white people in our communities really caring on that personable level, unless you're a neighbor that we grew up with you, and the old lady that, you know, we've helped across the street. And then because she didn't get robbed, that's how she knows, wow, and she starts, you know, liking us as kids. We look at that as from a respect level. And that's the reason why we're helping her. We're not helping her because of any racial issue. We're helping her because she's naturally just an older person, or just any neighbor next door. I'd still do it now. Like, I shovel my neighbor's snow, or somebody has a baby down the street and I go, like, you know, and try to help them out. That's kind of a natural thing that neighbors do. We're just not used to being around each other culturally enough to look at each other as like neighbors and friends and family and fall in love with each other. And that's what we need to do. That's why with some in our community, something bad happens, we all feel it, because we've grown fond of that person, and we care. So the empathy part is there. But to answer your question, I just think it's really pretty simple. If I looked into that room, and I say it all the time, right? If I looked in that room and I see all white people in that science program, I'm gonna be like, nah. But if I saw you, I would be like, oh, that's my girl. I'm gonna go in. And then I'd be, hey, what does it take to actually get in this program? Because there's always one Black person. Look at all the college pictures of all, pick any Black person that you see online and look at their college pictures. It's like 6 white dudes and 1 Black guy, right? I like playing golf. Is there ever 2 or 3 of us playing golf? Probably not, right? And it's a real thing. It's kind of, you know, I'm being sarcastic with it, but, you know, and facetious, but it really is very real, because the reality is there's not enough people within that group saying, where's all your friends at? If I go to a wedding, you know, one of a white friend's wedding, very seldom, and I look around, this happened to me recently, I'm like, you mean to tell me it's been 30 years and you don't have any more Black friends? How is that possible? Like, but it's very common. You go someplace and it's not about somebody not liking you. It's about being free and willing to invite more people in. And I think that's the roadblock that we have to, that's the wall we have to tear down, and we have to do it together, you know, by you being open and honest and saying, I recognize this and I don't know how to deal with it. And then I say, oh, that's easy. All you gotta do is tell me what's going on, and I can try to get some people up in there, because I know some kids right now that want to be scientists. Like, are you kidding me? But nobody does that. corporations, schools, you know, schools are nothing but corporation. Colleges are nothing but corporation. They're about making money, keeping that real, right? So if those corporations actually got involved with the community, I do a lot of like lectures at Bridgewater State University over the last 5 or 6 years. They're very much community school. So I go from dealing with the college students, and this is more digital audio, copyright law, that kind of thing. And then I spend a lot of time with the South Shore public high schools with their STEM program, right? And I try to switch that around to STEAM, with, you know, to stick the arts in there. But I spend time there because on that high school level is where we're building that pipeline. Any agencies, media companies that I do work for now, film companies, Lisa Strout, she's the commissioner for Boston. So all the films that come into Boston, she,
sorry guys, I need to leave the call, but I just want to say I appreciate each of you and I thank you for tonight.
Thanks, Rudy. And I'm gonna
Thanks,
just
Rudy.
finish
Thank
this
you.
point, then I'll end. But basically, there's organizations right now that are looking to take kids from our community and, you know, build that pipeline into colleges, and especially within the creative arts, which is where I am. In science, like there's kids right now in creative organizations that are willing and yearning to be able to have an outlet for those students, especially in today's climate. They're looking to do that. So I'd love to be able to kind of follow up on any opportunities just collectively, if this is what Harvard's doing.
Well, that's, I mean, and David just chatted me something like this, but right, like instead of going through like these like programs, like building from individual relationships first is something that like very like resonates with me a lot also.
I gotta go for keep this going, okay?
Okay.
But yeah, no, I think that's really good feedback. And yes, I think it would be useful for us to keep talking as well.
Yeah, you know, I don't mean to be like rash sometimes, but when I try to talk the way I think as a Black person, and most people aren't used to that, right? So the terms Black people, white people, I was with a friend yesterday, you know, social distancing, and he's a white guy. And he was saying, you know, something, people get nervous when you say Black Lives Matter, but I try to ask my friends, you know, do the lives of Black people matter? You know, like, does that matter? Like, can you actually say that the life of this Black person matters? You know, to like cut to the chase, forget about the hashtag BLM and all these other negative connotations that go along with that. But are you able to actually answer that question? Because this is what's going on in the world and this is the concern, separated from everything else. So it's almost just, it's the same thing as Black Lives Matter, but you're just asking that question, you know? And I thought that was really kind of profound the way he put it, because he's the white guy who is my friend, like a brother, and he's sharing that with me. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's kind of like what I try to do, but seems like if somebody has a block on it, they have a block on it, you know? And again, with your profession and you're there talking about science, you had my attention like right away, you know, because it's just a cool thing. But then the other part of me was like, wow, what kind of education does that take to get to where you are and where you're trying to go, right? So that's that conversation to be able to share with someone, do this, 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 and this. That's what I do with music. You want to be a part of a Grammy organization that sounds real jazzy. It's really NARAS, the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, right? Nobody really thinks about that when you're watching the TV show, the award show. But it's a professional development organization. But they don't share that. So I'm an advocate within that creative agency to kind of share, like, you know something, this is professional development. They have Grammy U, but that's like Berkeley and Conservatory. If you're at Berkeley Conservatory, you don't need Grammy U. You made it, you're there. You know, the kids that are on the other side of Mass Ave don't have that. And Sarah, and I think you and I were talking about that as well, but it's really pretty simple, but we just have to have people that understand what that disconnection is. And you just said that. You know, you just said what your challenge was, and we talk about, oh, Sadie, let's just do this, and we're good. And there really isn't a problem anymore. You know, it's just it's a numbers game at this point. How many people can we make aware that this is what's going on? Do we do it in email blasts, social media, a billboard somewhere? What corporation can we get to talk about this with their PSA? You know, that kind of thing. That's what needs to happen. There's a lot of media agencies that are doing that. across the board, especially with social justice right now. And one of the questions in the Black community is, why? Why is that company doing this? You know? And even a lot of my white friends, is kind of interesting. A cop friend of mine, a white cop, and I make that distinction because he's like, I get so frustrated when I see Black Lives Matter signs in Lexington on these lawns because no Black people are there. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Elaborate, right? So he was saying that if you were there and you knocked on that door, would they receive you being welcome? I was like, oh, that's interesting. So it's like, if I moved in next door, would they be happy? You know, would they bring me in? And this is a real thing. And when white people share that kind of, that doubt of intentions, it's worth a conversation. And it's also an opportunity for those people to say, you know something, this is the work that I'm putting in. You know, if I knocked on that door in Lexington, you know, can you tell me what you've been doing? Can you tell me why this is important? You know, like, are you married? Is this like, do you have family members? Or like, why? Is it just because you feel guilty? You know what I mean? Because that goes on a lot as well, you know, but am I really welcome in your home? So are you going to come to my cookout, right? You're going to always come to my cookout. Are you going to invite me to your cookout? That's
interesting. Yeah, that you say that, because I've been, and I'm just going to go out on a tangent now, but like, I get really frustrated, and I guess I haven't really been,
I don't want to interrupt. I just want to just say thank you, and I'll have to go.
Lovely to have you. Thank you. I hope we stay in touch.
Thank you. Yeah, please do.
Bye, Wendy.
Bye.
Natasha.
Yeah,
Thanks, Sarah.
I'm
Thanks
about
so
to jump off too. I actually
Bye-bye.
drop
I'm gonna do
something
the
off
same.
to a family, because they're having a funeral tomorrow, so I gotta go drop them off something.
Okay.
And get ready for one tomorrow too. But thank you again. Next conversation, let me know. I have some young people that definitely would love to come check out what you do. The science.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, you have my email, so.
Yeah. So I'll definitely reach out, and everybody, y'all have a great evening. Natasha, I'm glad you made it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. See y'all later.
Thank you, Donald. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know we all have to go anyways, but
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I don't want to keep you on too long.
No, it's totally fine.
Time is valuable.
You can see I have a big mouth. This is what happened to Sarah and I. But the reality is, I feel like I've done a lot of this work over the last 25 years, right? So it like easy, and I'm not old and I'm not that young, right? But I did grow up in the city. I went to Boston Tech. I don't know if you're familiar, but Boston Tech is an exam school that's like more central Boston, Dorchester. It's like central Boston.
Okay.
But you know, it's on the between Dorchester and Roxbury, kind of back where our school was. So it was right there. But students in the friends that I made were all from all around Boston. So I had this contrast of what was going on within Cobbin Square, where I grew up, and the kids that I hung out with after school. But then I had, you know, my Chinese friends in high school, and we hooked school and we went to the beach, you know, stuff like that. We went to Legal Seafoods, and I had no money, and I didn't know. So it was like, you know, we went skiing, things that I would never done. And so I also saw the world differently. And then from music, from touring in different countries, things like that, you know, it kind of opened me up. But also from a compassionate standpoint, I just felt like, wow, why am I accepted and other people aren't? You know, and that's the question that I think is the big thing. And most people are like, oh, forget it, I'm not interested, and I'm not, you know, forget about them. And then their resentment sets in, and they really just don't have the opportunity to have a one-on-one with you so you can share, right? And that's what's important about us sharing our talents. You know, it's the same as you're talking about, you said you're zapping, you know, you use the word zap, I believe, right?
Zapping, yeah.
with lasers, right? That automatically just sounds
that's what I do.
Cool. So you're the cool scientist, right? Like scientist, geek person. So, you know, that resonates with younger people, resonates with all.
Sure.
But, you know, to be able to share that with people, I think a lot of people in positions, especially position of power, don't do that. And a lot of Black people in positions of power don't care to have this conversation either, to be completely honest. You know, like politicians, Black politicians, and I'm real open, you know, I'm very, you know, boisterous about my opinion in certain situations, because I don't feel like I have anything to lose when it comes down to what's like morally right. Like, what should we do? How are we going to fix this problem? So I can't be phony with people. I have to just tell you how I feel about things, and that's it. But the reality is also I have a lot to learn as well. And this is my growth process. And that's what I've done over the years, to be able to kind of share who I am, you share who you are, and all of a sudden we become friends. And people are like, oh, how do you know about this and that? I'm like, well, I try to listen, and we all just kind of resonate with each other. But the more we can do that, the more we can create opportunity. Like Donald said, automatically, I know people right now that would love to see that program, and people that are either in school and they're thinking about what they want to do, or somebody that doesn't even know if they want to go to school at all, doesn't know if they have the resources to go to school.
To
right?
open those spaces, yeah. We talk about so much about how does Harvard change, and how does that, it's a place that is invested in elitism. It's the best in the world. And so how do you marry elitism with white supremacy? That's a very thin line to me. And then how do we open up this campus, and a campus that has been bound to upholding the gates, right? To get into Harvard is the ultimate success. So it's all about getting in, and it's all about protecting that reputation, that elitism, that refinedness. So how do you break that structure and start opening and saying, so I was saying to Malik, even if you had a business meeting and you said, I wanted to come over to the library and use that conference space, just start breaking open some of these really rigid spaces. And when you do that, I see at the library, it's upsetting to people because it's a place that has been built on rules, achievement, and meeting success by accomplishing what you're supposed to do. So when you disrupt that and even say, well, Malik doesn't belong here, he doesn't go here, he doesn't work here, and it starts, it's part of the system of systematic change. That how do you deconstruct? So little by little, opening up how we use this space, use its resources, welcome people, include. It's a big conversation.
Yeah, well, that's what interesting, because social justice now is like the buzzword and things that people are doing. So again, from a media standpoint, a company could be doing a commercial, or let's say even the state of Massachusetts, with anything they do, right? A certain percentage of, diversity that they require within any project, all these big buildings that are going on, and anything you can name, they have these diversity requirements. Are they bringing Black and brown people in because they really feel like it's the right thing to do, or are they doing it just because they know they get an incentive? And that's the question that always happens. If Harvard knew that, something, if I opened this up and did this community thing, they're going to get an incentive, versus, what we would hope that they would look at diversifying their pipeline of students, right? It's whether or not they find that to be important. Do they see the value in that? And that's the big thing there, and this is the work, this is definitely the work. I've been somebody to be in those. When I go to the Harvard Club for Thanksgiving, right? Crazy stuff I've done. I'm looking around like, I don't want to be in this place. Why am I? And, again, I've been in Harvard, the Harvard Club in Boston, right? Looking over, and it's really cool. But I try to, build that relationship to even when you're up there and you're looking out the windows, you're looking at, across the water and everything else. It's one of these things where I still say, what am I doing up here? Right? This is pretty cool. But, do they really want me up here is the other question, But I think that's just something that everyone's going to be different. I try not to judge too many books by their cover. We know the systematic, that white supremacy or systematic culture of Harvard does exist, and it exists in Berkeley and exists in the conservatory and all the rest. But, we have to show some kind of change for that.
Exist is such a benign word to use. Exist is constantly perpetuated. I think it's so funny, Sarah, that you specifically mentioned these, like the image of like the gates, like the wrought iron gates with like the ivy over it and everything, because so there was a group of us this year that was trying to change our website because it's horrible. I mean, you open it up and literally it's just like it's literal ivy, and then like statues of white guys, like busts of whatever. It's like, first of all, I'm not even interested in this website. Like, why? And you would think that something as small as like, let's just put a different picture on the front of the website. And we just got this pushback about like, oh, you know, we would have to run it by so-and-so, and then the committee would have to look at it. And I'm like, okay, all of this is arbitrary. And this is all just like, I think it's like the way that you, Sarah, was it you or was it you, Malik? I can't remember who made this comment, but just like, there's this literal like white code of conduct that like, okay, here's some arbitrary rules in place, or like maybe they might seem arbitrary. No one's going to question them. If you do, you're going to be left behind in a conversation or asked to leave, because in fact, they're not arbitrary and they're meant to perpetuate social and whatever kind of structures.
So obstructive, yeah.
Racial structures. I should use the word race because that's a white thing too, to dance around the word race. But like, so how was I going to tie this back to, it's really like easy to feel like freaked out, like, so I've also been like back and forth with like, I've been like the most annoying, like just that lady that's sending a bunch of emails the past few weeks, just because like, so I'm from Milwaukee, and I went to a high school that like, oddly enough, it was like a tiny, like small Catholic high school, but like was strangely like decently diverse and representative of like the race makeup of Milwaukee. But of course, the school's ability to actually support, not ability, that dismisses their agency in the problem, but just their complete refusal to do anything other than use these kids as like marketing props. And like, yeah, does Harvard want Black and brown people to come in because like they think that, you know, losing the perspective of entire chunks of the population is detrimental? Or do they want Black and brown people in because they'll look bad if they don't? And that's such a valuable question. And like I feel like people ask it all the time, and there's so many different ways you can dismiss it as like, you're being judgmental, you're being like, whatever. Yeah.
One of my friends, he told me from an executive level, he was like, listen, you got to do things, you know, on purpose for that purpose, you know. And this is our collective conversation that he and I had, you know. Again, it was like a professional meeting. We were talking about diversity in the technology space, you know, and he was really bothered by it. You know, he's a Jewish guy, and he understands, you know. And I told him, I said, when I walk into this company, all I see is no one that looks like me. I'm scanning automatically. I'm scanning around, no matter what room I'm in. It's a natural thing to do. The same thing as code switching is a natural thing that Black people do, if you're familiar with code switching, right? And it's kind of a joke to us behind the scenes, but it's something that we do because we just don't know who to trust. You know, I don't know, but that's why I'm kind of open. Like, if we're going to work together or just collaborate on whatever it is in life, I have to be who I am. I have to talk to you. And I want you to say like, oh yeah, I just met this Black dude, or I just met this white dude, or I met this Chinese dude. That's how we talk to our friends, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's nothing racist about speaking like that, because that's how we think, you know. And if you think it, just like you said, like, I don't want to say that the race thing or whatever, you know, normally if you're just talking to your friend, your girl, somebody you know, like, I just seen this Black dude down the street, he just did this, whatever, nothing to do with his race at all, just because you're describing him, right? And culture now, it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. It's bad for those people that are very uncomfortable because they got to figure it out. But it's really good because now we can just kind of do and say whatever we want. If I had hair, I'd have an afro with a pick in the back, and I just show up to our meeting and you can't say nothing, right? Because now it's like, this is a learning experience for everyone, right? And we know culturally in society, if you try to prejudge me right now, you're going to be on the hot seat. So you don't want to do that. So it's kind of interesting that people can just be themselves, but we're sharing who we are. We're sharing our culture. We're not doing it to antagonize you, right? We're only doing it to share culture because nobody was able to do that before. At least Black people weren't able to freely do that, where I could have on a dashiki right now you know, because I went to an African event, or that's just my culture at home, right? And I can be, come on, how many Zoom meetings are we on, right? We see all kinds of people dressing however they want. They don't get dressed at all. They have beards when they didn't have beards, and the hair's gray when it wasn't gray before. So everyone is just very free and open and non-judgmental. So I think it's really a great time to have this conversation as well because of that. So.
That's just interesting. I don't want to keep you on the line too long.
All right. No.
But just that you said that you know, you'll be telling a story where like, oh, this black dude, this white dude, this Chinese dude, whatever. And like for you to be like naming this race, like the function doesn't actually have any like racist outcome. Whereas like if I'm telling a story to like a white friend of mine or like one of my sisters or something, and I think that like either like I just like remember the race of the person, or I think it's like remarkable in some way, I specifically, and this isn't something we ever get taught, but we just like are conditioned to do it, will avoid talking about the person's race at all costs, but we'll give like coded like hints as to like what the person, and it's so harmful because it gives it so much more like, it's like so one example, and like I'm almost done reading White Fragility. This example this woman uses is like, if there's a kid in like a grocery cart, like the kid in the grocery cart that like points and it's like, oh, a black person. And then the mom is like so embarrassed and she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And she like rolls the cart away, whatever. It's like, okay, but what did you just teach your child with that reaction? That being black is bad? That would be like you would have the same reaction if your child had been like, oh, that person is ugly or that person is fat. Like you just taught your child that that's a bad word.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, oh, it's a black person. Like, yep, that's correct.
Yeah,
like
it's actually more of a teaching moment, right? It's an opportunity to learn, because then you can say, oh, this person is from this country, or this is, and then you can talk about fun stuff, like whether it be, you know, cultural, clothes, music, food. There's all these things, you know, I say it all the time, like, you know, white folks will go to Jamaica and come back with cornrows in their hair, right? But they won't go down to Roxbury or Dorchester to where the hair salon is and just go get their hair done. But if you were my friend, I'd take you with you and you wouldn't worry about it, right? Like, yo, girl, let's go down here. Because and again, it's like from Bo Derek days, which is old from a long time ago, but she was like the first actress to all of a sudden sport cornrows, you know? And then black people are like, yo, you know, this cultural appropriation type of stuff that's going on. Again, now that's another topic that people are talking about. But the reality is, if you wanted that, you could go down to the local, whatever, go from your neighborhood. You're in JP, so you're kind of like still getting a good mix, right? But if you were in Lexington and you said, can you give me a referral to a good place to get my cornrows done? And I said, yeah, go down to Morton Street in Roxbury. I mean, in Dorchester, off of Blue Hill Ave, right?
Yeah.
Would you go and, you know, you could be skeptical because of what you see on the news and media and all that stuff. And I get that. So I say, you know, some say, meet me down wherever. I'll go down there. I know some folks in there, and I'll take you in and go do it. And maybe I do go as a friend and hang out with you and see how you transform into whatever it is that you transform. But that's what friends do, right? Friends do things like that for each other. And it could be a hairstyle. It could be going shopping together. Guys do that. My guy friends, especially when I was traveling, like, dude, I'm gonna be in San Francisco, meet me. And we end up going Christmas shopping together or at Macy's. And we do that with not just different races, but we do that with different, you know, gender or LBGT, all my LBGT friends. You know, we go out and go do something fun together, you know, even my gay guy friends, right? Because I'm like, that looks pretty dope. I'm very heterosexual, right? But I can still care about my friend enough to say that looks good on you, even if he's gay, right? I'm not worrying about that. You're my friend. And my job as your friend is to be your mirror because that's why we went shopping together, right? Think about it. Yeah. Prince has a song called If I Was Your Girlfriend. You dig that up. If you listen to that, then, you know, it's called If I Was Your Girlfriend. But it's you know, that to me is how I've kind of learned to kind of share, to break down this uncomfortableness between us as people, right? Because we didn't even talk about the Asian thing, the Indian thing, you know, and every other culture, you know, every other, you know, culture that's there. And it happens.
The film to me did so well is like it was so intimate. It was like you became friends with these guys on the film. You know, you're like, I mean, how? Yeah, these kids that were bangers, they become into your life in this film in this way that. I mean, I think that's what you're talking about, making these relationships real.
Yeah.
These friendships.
Because behind closed doors, you know, like a lot of guys, you know, I have a lot of friends that grew up again the same way, same as the kids on the film. That's why it kind of resonated with me, and that's why I think it affected me so much from a negative standpoint. Like I was saying, it was kind of depressing to even work on music for it, and this is what the music ends up sounding like. But I also know that a lot of those friends, when I think about them, or if I still see them now, they might be in this environment where they have to kind of be mindful of what they're doing and kind of be hard, more so, but they're clowns. As soon as we see each other, just like we see our old friends from when we grew up and we did something silly together, you automatically start talking about that silly thing and people are laughing and joking and acting crazy or whatever. And that's the human part that we're trying to portray in the film. That's the human part that I try to portray. Some people look at me because I'm a bald head black guy, right? Even at Bridgewater, I walked into class one day and I joke about that kind of stuff because nobody, everyone's younger students, but especially when this whole political thing was going on in elections and this whole racial thing was going on. And here I am, the bald head black dude walks into class. I'm your teacher for today, right? And so we can talk about that because within that class is other cultures, other, sexuality. And we had a great opportunity to talk about those things. So it might be stereotypical and uncomfortable, but that's what we got to get rid of, like that stereotypical judgmental thing. And the only way for us to do it is to not know what to think about that book, right? We're looking at the cover and be like, yeah, but I got my friend, he looked like that book too, and he was like this. So I'm gonna kind of stay open-minded. We have to be aware of our environment, but be open-minded for the possibilities, the optimistic possibilities. That's how I've learned, and I'm not perfect, and I stop myself all the time. Even out in the world, even in my neighborhood, I see an American flag, and I'm like, oh my God, But I've also seen Confederate flags running up and down the street too on the back of somebody's pickup truck, and I'm like, oh man. But then I see the old guy that looks like he's, racist as anything, and he's like the nicest guy in the world because thank God I gave myself the opportunity to say hello, and then I beat myself all the time. I'm like, oh man, why did you think that way? Why did you think that way? You got to stop thinking that way. So I'm very human like that as well. And I try to be honest because we all do it. Absolutely all do it.
Thank you so much. Well, let's, we have each other's emails. Let's keep.
Let's totally connect.
Yeah. You've got
your social media and everything else if you want to connect there as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'll respond to the email. I'll give my other contact information and whatever.
Thank you, Sadie.
I love to stay in touch and whatever here.
Yes.
In general.
And some bacteria. And I'm also curious just because I also have a teensy bit of a music background. So I also just
oh really? Oh yeah, we definitely
oh yeah. Okay, good. Okay, I'll be following up. All right,
Thank
great.
you so much. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. This was great.
You're welcome.
Good night.
Okay, I'll talk to you guys soon.
We'll be in touch.